Hey everyone, there are a lot of myths about Social Security. Some of these falsehoods are repeated so often that they've worked their way into what people accept as the truth. But in today's video, I want to clear the waters and separate fact from fiction on 7 of the myths that I hear most often. Stay tuned. Hey, I'm Devin, and this channel is all about breaking down Social Security and retirement planning so you can use the rules to your advantage. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell so you won't miss any of the new stuff I put out. And everyone watching this ought to hit that like button. So myths are certainly nothing new. The ancient Greeks had their version of them, and even to this day, some of their mythology carries over. So for example, Nike, the athletics and shoe company, they're named after the Greek goddess of victory. But that's not the kind of myth that I'm talking about today. Those myths are passed down as part of cultural heritage, but the kind I'm talking about is more urban legend or even outright falsehoods that are manufactured purely for the purpose of political persuasion or maybe even profit. These can be dangerous because they can screw up the way you plan and prepare for the future. You may be thinking, Devin, I'm too smart to fall for these Social Security myths that you're talking about. But listen, believing these myths is not just reserved for idiots. I've talked to some very smart people who believes these myths to be true, and it's really no surprise. Those who propagate this nonsense understand why we believe myths like these. It's called the illusory truth effect. This effect describes the way people are more likely to believe something is true after hearing it said many times over and over and over. This is because of this familiar feeling we experience when we hear something that we've heard before. And this feeling feels very similar to the experience of hearing something that we know is true. And so our mind correlates those two together, and it's easy to accept that as the truth. For example, we heard that Trump colluded with Russia so many times that a lot of people invested a tremendous amount of hope in the belief that Robert Mueller was going to arrest either high-ranking Trump administration officials, members of Trump's own family, and maybe, just maybe, President Trump himself. The same was true with Hillary Clinton's email server, and to this day, chants of "lock her up" echo at campaign rallies. A lot of this information on both sides was based on information that had been repeated over and over and over and over until it seemed true. And I don't want your retirement to be based on myths like these, so let's jump into these 7 Social Security myths and set the record straight once and for all. And just a quick side note before we get in. I really do care about what you think. In fact, most of my video ideas come from comments that you have made. So whether they're positive or negative, it gives me ideas, and I enjoy using those to craft my future content. So after each of these 7 myths, I'm going to ask for your candid feedback, and you can just leave that in the comments below. So let's jump in. Myth number 1, illegal immigrants collect Social Security. I've gotten so many of these comments on this channel. The belief that illegal immigrants can come to the U.S. and immediately receive Social Security benefits is simply not true. What is true is that citizenship is not required. However, immigrants must be lawfully present and must pay in for at least 10 years. In short, they have to follow the same eligibility rules as everyone else. The Congressional Research Service makes this rule clear in their piece on Social Security benefits for non-citizens. They say, if an individual never obtains work authorization, none of his or her Social Security covered earnings qualify for benefits. And we can't get much more clear than that. So here's my question. Does this make you think differently about immigration and Social Security? And then myth number 2, the government raided the trust fund. What typically goes along with this is the idea that the Social Security system would not be facing insolvency or some of the problems they have if the government would have just kept their thieving hands out of it. But here's the truth. There has never been any change in the way Social Security payroll taxes are used by the federal government. From the beginning, the trust fund has always worked the same way, and it's never been put into the general fund of the government. It is a separate account. Now, what caused some of this confusion was a change that happened back in 1969 where the transactions of the trust fund started to be included in a single budget along with all the other functions of the federal government. They called this the unified budget. However, this was changed in 1990, and the trust fund is now shown in its own separate account, what they refer to as off budget. None of these movements had anything to do with the actual operations of the trust fund, though. It was purely a change of accounting practices. So this raises the question, then where's the money? Well, for those expecting a Social Security trust fund filled with trillions in cash, they're going to be disappointed in the next part. So where's the money? The Treasury is using it. I know you may be saying, Devin, this proves the point that the government did not use the money correctly and they did steal the money. No, listen, the government has always used incoming revenue to meet its current obligations before it borrows money. This includes funds coming in that's earmarked for the Social Security Trust Fund and a lot of other purposes as well. However, for every dollar that comes in from Social Security taxes, there is a special issue Treasury bond that takes its place. And those bonds are earning interest too. In fact, since these bonds were first introduced to the trust fund, they have contributed $1.9 trillion in interest. Now, for reference, the total trust fund is only $2.9 trillion. It's safe to say that if this fund would have actually been put in some sort of box, this lockbox, and just left in cash, then the trust fund would have been worth about 2/3 less than it is now because it wouldn't have that interest that came in, and it would probably run dry much earlier than it's currently projected to. Look, there's no difference between the way the federal government runs the trust funds and the way your bank handles your accounts. When your paycheck or whatever the money is you deposit goes into the bank uses that money and they make an accounting entry. When you need your money, they pull it out from their account and notate a debit to your account. Now, no one gets real excited about banks misusing funds, and no one should get too worked up about the federal government using a nearly identical process as banks use. But I do want to know what you think. Do you think the government is doing enough to protect the trust funds? Again, put your thoughts in the comments below. And now, myth number 3. Social Security is going bankrupt. Now, this is one that's often used as a political motivator to get people to vote in a certain way. In every campaign, there's always talk about how bad Social Security is and how that particular candidate is going to fix it and make everything okay. And the news channels have figured out, too, that this is a headline that's going to get people to click. So they love to use it often. Here's what's really going on. Social Security benefits are considered a pay-as-you-go system. That means that the money that's coming in from today's taxes are going out to pay today's retirees. For example, the taxes that I pay in are helping to fund the benefits that my dad is receiving. For many years, though, there were more people paying in taxes than were receiving them. That meant that more money was coming in than needed to go out. So there was an excess there. And that excess started to accumulate in the trust fund that we hear so much about. But now the worker to retiree ratio has started to shift, and by next year, 2020 is the current projection, there will not be enough coming in to pay benefits, so they'll start to pull the extra from the trust fund. But the trust fund only has enough in it to satisfy that additional amount until 2035. And once it's dry, benefits are going to be paid from Social Security taxes alone, and those are only projected to be about 76% of what they need to be. But this does not sound like bankruptcy to me, as some suggest. Some people act as if it's the end of Social Security. You know, if your boss told you today that you were only going to get paid 76% of your normal salary, would you be bankrupt? No. You'd be mad. You might quit, but you'd learn to make adjustments. And that's what's going to happen to Social Security. Most likely, there's going to be other benefit cuts or some increased taxes to fix this problem. But Social Security is not in danger of just going away completely. So I do want to know what you think, though. What is more likely? Is it a benefit cut or a tax increase? And myth number 4, members of Congress don't use Social Security. The thought behind this is that congressmen and women, being the ones who write the rules, have carved out for themselves a special retirement plan and don't have to mess around with Social Security. And since they don't have to rely on this, they don't really care about what happens to it. Well, it's not true. Since 1984, all members of Congress are required to contribute to Social Security just like everyone else. And now myth number 5. You'll never get back what you paid in. This is one that I've heard for years, and it wasn't until recently that I decided to dive in and figure this out for myself. To do this, I wanted to look at dollars that I would put in versus dollars that I would take out. Also, I wanted to look at only the part of the taxes that I personally contributed to Social Security and not the full FICA tax amount. So just keep in mind that the FICA tax is 15.3%. You pay, as an employee, 1/2 of that, and the other half is paid by your employer. So it's 7.65% that you pay, 7.65% that your employer pays. But of that amount, 1.45 goes to Medicare and 6.2 goes to Social Security. And it's that 6.2% that I counted. I then looked at an individual who started working in 1972 and retired in 2019. Now, that's a long time to work, but I wanted to illustrate what a maximum working lifetime may look like and thus give an opportunity for more taxes to be paid in. I then looked at 4 different income levels during that time period. To get a baseline, I used the National Average Wage Index, which is published by the Social Security Administration, and I looked at amounts of 50%, 100%, and 150% of that wage index. And for a maximum amount of Social Security taxes paid in, I also looked at an individual who would have earned the maximum taxable wages for every year he or she was working. Then with these earnings, I simply used the calculator on the Social Security website, which you should use, by the way, if you haven't already, to calculate what the benefit for each of these income levels would be at full retirement age. I then simply increased that amount by 2% per year to keep up with the cost of living adjustments. When you look at all the income combinations, you'll see that all of those individuals got back the dollars they'd personally paid in within just a few years of filing for benefits. In fact, the amount of taxes paid in pales in comparison to the amount of lifetime benefits paid out. So yes, you do get back what you put in and then some, frankly. So after seeing this, do you think Social Security is a good investment? I'd really want to hear your comments below. Myth number 6, we're starting to wind this up. Social Security payments are an earned right. Well, as nice as that would be, it's just not the case, unfortunately. Social Security payments are not guaranteed, and laws can be changed at any time that impact what you'll receive in benefits. Now, one of the reasons I include this in these myths is that we're nearing an election season, and politicians love to throw around the fact that you have an entitlement to these benefits or that it's an earned right, when they know good and well that it's not the case. The government has almost encouraged this from the beginning. If you look, in fact, at a 1936 pamphlet from Social Security Administration, it says, the United States government will set up an account for you. These checks will come to you as a right. Well, that sounds pretty rock solid. But listen, the Supreme Court in 2 different situations now has already clarified this language substantially. In Helvering versus Davis, the Supreme Court's language set the tone for the future. In their written opinion, they said, the proceeds of both taxes, they're talking about both sides of FICA taxes, are to be paid into the Treasury like internal revenue taxes generally and not earmarked in any way. So that eliminated the idea of this separate personal account that everyone has and that the Social Security pamphlet implied. And then in Fleming v. Nestor, the Supreme Court made it clear how the government felt about an individual's right to Social Security benefits. They said there has been a temptation throughout the program's history for some people to suppose that their FICA payroll taxes entitle them to a benefit in a legal contractual sense. That is to say, if a person makes FICA contributions over a number of years, Congress cannot, according to this reason, change the rules in such a way that would deprive a contributor of a promised future benefit. Under this reasoning, benefits under Social Security could possibly only be increased, never decreased, if the act could be amended at all. Congress clearly, Congress clearly had no such limitation in mind when crafting the law. Listen, if there was any doubt left about an individual's right to Social Security benefit, that last sentence should banish it completely. But just in case people forget that benefits can be changed or stopped altogether at any time, the Social Security Administration puts this reminder on every statement they create. Your estimated benefits are based on current law. Congress has made changes in the past and can do so at any time. So the takeaway from this is that the criteria for eligibility could change with the whims of politics. Just take a look, if you don't believe me, at the means testing conversations that we're starting to hear about now. Just because you get a statement showing a benefit amount doesn't mean that you'll eventually get that benefit. Now, I'm not trying to be a prophet of doom here, but I do think that changes are going to come, and it's most likely going to hit those who have significant assets and income. But whatever your scenario, just know they can change the rules. So let me ask you this. Do you think law should be written to guarantee Social Security? And last, myth number 7. Everyone should delay filing until age 70. This is a myth that finance folks like to spread based purely on the fact that for every month you delay filing, you get a higher benefit. And more must be better, right? But there are multiple scenarios where filing early makes more sense than filing later. The first time it makes sense is if you need the income, right? Sometimes there's simply no strategy. You don't need to feel guilty about filing early if you no longer working and you just need the income to come in. Just go file for benefits. But second, if you're single and you have health issues, you probably need to go ahead and file. We talk a lot about strategies for married couples, but if you're single, you really only have your own income needs and your own life expectancy to consider. This is one of the very few times where I recommend using a break-even analysis. This tells you at what age you would have to live to receive the same benefits for a later filing age. So for example, if you filed at age 62 or if you filed at age 67, how long do you have to live for those benefits to intersect and catch up to each other? And third, spousal issues. And there are really two separate spousal issues that you have to consider here. The first is if your spouse is the higher earner and has health concerns which will shorten their life expectancy. Since their earnings were higher, their Social Security benefit will likely be higher. And if they pass away early, your lower benefit will drop off and you'll begin to receive their higher benefit. So if you delayed your own benefit for several years so you could increase your own benefit and you eventually get your Social Security from your spouse, it wouldn't have been worth it to have delayed all those years. The next spousal issue is that if your spouse is the lower earner but older than you, so if your spouse's earnings were so low that a spousal benefit from your record is going to be the highest benefit that they'll receive, keep in mind that they cannot receive that benefit until you file for your own benefit. This means that by filing early, you're going to receive a reduced benefit, but your spouse will become entitled to a benefit as well. The reason we include this is that once your spouse reaches his or her full retirement age, their benefit will not increase. So if they're older than you, they could be missing months or years worth of benefits after their full retirement age, just sitting there waiting on you to file for your benefits. And then fourth, if there are survivor benefits. Years ago, there were a few filing strategies and they were all closed and done away with, except surviving spouses strategies. Since the survivor's benefit still allows these switching strategies where you can go back and forth, you could file for your survivor's benefit at 62 or even 60, really, and then switch back to your own benefit at 70, at which point it would have grown by at least 24% higher than your full retirement age benefit. And when it makes sense, a variation of that can also be done in reverse. And then the last case where it may make sense to file earlier is if you have minor or disabled children at home. If so, they may qualify for a benefit when you file. So by delaying your filing, you may be missing out on a benefit for your child. Yeah, you'll take a reduction, but your child will also be getting a benefit and potentially your wife as well. So those are all the things you need to know about filing early, except this one last thing. Most likely, if you're still working, you're going to be exposed to the earnings limit. At full retirement age, it goes away, but you do need to know that that earnings limit is going to be in place. So I would like to hear your input here. What do you think is the best age to file? I know we've covered a lot of ground in this video, but I hope now you feel much more informed about some of these myths that have been floating around, and you can help me make them die. Hey, thanks for taking the time so much to get informed today. If you want to continue learning, be sure to watch all the other videos on this channel, visit my blog, socialsecurityintelligence.com, and get a copy of my book on Amazon if you haven't already, Social Security Basics, and as we're recording this, it's the #1 book on Social Security benefits. Well, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.